Sawadee-kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're starting a new book in this group. We're starting volume 8 of the book series, which is titled The Foremost Householders. This is a book that has a collection of teachings specifically for household practitioners, but in reality, the entire book series is for household practitioners, but there's a collection here that's going to really help individuals who are in the household life. But even if you're in the ordained life, you would need to learn these teachings because it's going to help you in your journey to enlightenment, and it's also going to help you in teaching household practitioners as well. So I'd like to welcome all of you guys to our class today, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. The way that we do this class is that I invite students who are in Zoom to be able to read a chapter from our text. If you would like to read a chapter from the text, all you need to do is electronically raise your hand. I'll be able to see that. And then I'll be able to call on you, and you'll be able to unmute your microphone and read one of the chapters or as many as you like. And then after someone reads, I will then share some teachings on that chapter, and then I'll open up to any and all questions that you guys have related to the chapter. If you'd like to ask questions, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any and all questions that you like. It looks like Pat raised his hand first, so we'll go to him. And then it looks like Yusuf, you'll have the second chapter. Just need to unmute there, Pat. Looks like Pat's Wi-Fi might have got frozen up. Yusuf, if you'd like to step in, you can take the first one, and then maybe when Pat comes back, he'll be able to take the next one.
Okay. Household life is crowded and dusty. Monk, here at Tathagata appears in the world, accomplished, fully enlightened, perfect in true wisdom and conduct, superb, of words, and comparable, leader of persons, to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, enlightened, fortunate. He declares this world with its gods, its maras, and its Brahmins. This generation, with its ascetics and Brahmins, its princes and its people, which he has himself realized with direct knowledge experience. He teaches the teachings, good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, with the right meaning and phrasing, and he reveals a holy life that is entirely perfect and pure. A householder, our householder son, our one born in some other clan, hears these teachings. On hearing the teachings, he acquires confidence in the Tathagata, possessing the confidence he considers thus. Household life is crowded and dusty. Life gone forth is wide open. It is not easy while living in a home to lead the holy life entirely perfect and pure as a polished shell. Suppose I shave off my hair and beard, put on the yellow robe, and go forth from the home life into homelessness.
All right. Thank you, Yusuf. So here the Buddha is talking about household life, how it's crowded and dusty, meaning it's challenging in the household life to be able to get to enlightenment. And that was very significant during the lifetime of the Buddha, that it was much more rare for a household practitioner to get to enlightenment during the lifetime of the Buddha as it is now, because during the lifetime of the Buddha, 2,500 years ago, household practitioners were really inundated with a number of tasks just to sustain their life. If you can think about having water in your home, every 2 or 3 or maybe 4 days, you had to take multiple trips back and forth to the well in order to get buckets of water and fill up the trough at the house with water. And this is something that would happen, maybe 3, 4, 5 hours a day for 2 or 3 or 4 times a week in order to just get water in the home. And then when we talk about food and clothing and other things like this, there was a lot of tasks just to sustain one's life. So it was very challenging for a household practitioner to be able to find the time to sit and learn the teachings, to understand them, to reflect on them, to practice them, to be able to train the mind through meditation and all these things, because they were so busy just trying to sustain life. That's not the case today. Today, it's actually just the opposite, that we have so much time on our hands that household practitioners oftentimes fill it up with things that are unbeneficial, like maybe surfing social media for hour upon hour, or watching YouTube videos endlessly, or doing any number of kinds of things like this, where if you actually shed some of those things and kind of bring them down to a minimum, you'll find that you have quite a bit of time in your life to be able to read the books, to be able to attend classes, to be able to meditate and really train your mind so that you can make the entire life really peaceful and joyful, because the mind is peaceful and joyful, getting closer and closer to enlightenment. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, that wasn't the case. So that's why he's sharing that household life was crowded and dusty, meaning it was very challenging to be able to make one's way to enlightenment. Let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. And remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any and all questions that you like. Looks like Yusuf has a question here. Go ahead, sir.
So here it says the teacher of gods and humans. In Buddhism, how many gods are there?
So during the lifetime of the Buddha, they believed in many different gods. So the Buddha was talking about those kinds of things. Oftentimes, though, he referred to the great Brahma, which is what we would refer to as God, the supreme being. He referred to this being in that way, but they believed in countless different gods. I've seen, up to 32 different gods. But we know now today through evolution and through the various teachers that we've had come that there's, if someone is understanding God, just one individual God. But because they thought of multiple gods during the lifetime of the Buddha was teaching about these different gods during his lifetime.
So he is talking about what they believe, that there are multiple gods, not about what it really is, like one God. He's talking about them.
Yeah, people would refer to the Buddha as teacher of gods. I wouldn't consider it that way. Like, knowing what I know, there's nothing that I have to teach God. God is fully wise, fully has all the wisdom that God needs. God, in fact, helped me on my journey. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, they thought of the Buddha as a teacher of gods. And he talked about multiple different gods. And he also talked about this great Brahma as well. So he did talk about what people believed in at the time. So that's how the teachings have been shared with us.
So the God has more wisdom than the Buddha, right?
In my opinion, yes. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, they didn't look at it that way.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Okay, let me see what other questions we might have in Facebook or YouTube. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. All right, so let's move to chapter 2. It looks like Pat is back with us. Pat, would you like to read this one? If you'd like to read this one, what I'm going to do is just have you read the first part, and then I'll pause you at a certain point because it's a really long discourse.
Okay, thank you. Paying homage to the 6 directions. Well, Venerable Sir, how should one pay homage to the 6 directions according to the noble discipline? It would be good if the perfectly enlightened one were to teach me the proper way to pay homage to the 6 directions according to the noble discipline. Young householder, it is by abandoning the 4 defilements of action, by not doing evil from the 4 causes, by not following the 6 ways of wasting one's substance, through avoiding these 14 evil ways that the noble disciple covers the 6 directions, and by such practice becomes a conqueror of both worlds, so that all will go well with him in this world and the next. And at the breaking up of the body after death, he will go to a good destination, a heavenly world. What are the 4 defilements of action that are abandoned? Taking life is 1. Taking what is not given is 1. Sexual misconduct is 1. False speech is 1. These are the 4 defilements of action that he abandons. What are the 4 causes of evil from which to refrain? Evil action springs from craving. It springs from anger. It springs from ignorance. It springs from fear. If the noble disciple does not act out of craving, anger, ignorance, or fear, he will not do evil from any one of the 4 causes. And which are the 6 ways of wasting one's substance that he does not follow? Addiction to strong drink and sloth-producing drugs is one way of wasting one's substance. Haunting the streets at unfitting times is 1. Attending fairs is 1. Being addicted to gambling is 1. Keeping unwholesome company is 1. Habitual idleness is 1. And how householder son, does the noble disciple protect the six directions? These six things are to be regarded as the six directions.
Okay, I'm going
The east denotes mother.
to pause you right there, Pat. So
Okay.
Here what we've got a discourse where an individual who was practicing Brahmanism was doing a certain rite or ritual or ceremony or worship. And what they would do is they would worship the six directions of the compass, meaning north, south, east, west. They would worship the zenith, which is above your head, and the nadar, which is below you. And this was a ritual or a ceremony, a worship that they were doing. And as the Buddha walked past, this individual asked him, how would I accomplish the same thing, but doing it in your discipline, in your teachings? So the Buddha, instead of talking about it as a rite, ritual, ceremony, or worship, explains it in terms of the natural law of karma, of cause and effect, and mainly training your own mind and how training your mind moves the mind towards improved benefits. So he talks about these four defilements of action to eliminate. And these are essentially the first four precepts of taking life, stealing, sexual misconduct, and false speech. Those are the four things that he says, okay, these are defilements of action, meaning pollutions. And you've studied these, if you've been studying with me for any period of time, as part of the five precepts where the Buddha really expands upon this and gives you much more illuminating language. So you're already familiar with these. Then the causes of those things are craving, anger, and ignorance. And then, of course, this fear, this discontentedness that rises up in the mind. As I've taught the five precepts and all the other teachings, I show you how craving, anger, and ignorance is what leads to unwholesome results, because you're making unwise decisions through that craving, anger, and ignorance, which then leads to unwholesome results. So there's a certain amount of craving, anger, and ignorance involved in killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and lying. So the Buddha is explaining how these are certain aspects of the mind that lead to this. And of course, fear is a discontent feeling that comes from craving, and it also is based in ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. So it's through eliminating those that one will eliminate those four causes. By eliminating craving, anger, and ignorance and any kind of fear, then that's what's going to help you to eliminate the killing, the stealing, the sexual misconduct, and the lying. Then the Buddha goes into 6 ways that one can waste one's substance. What he's talking about here is essentially like your vitality, your vigor, your ability to be successful and productive in life. He's giving you 6 things that if you do these things, that it's going to lead to this lack of vigor and vitality, and it's going to produce the lack of progress in one's own life. And if you've done any of these things, then you know through your own decisions and your own results that that's exactly what these things lead to. So the first one is about taking substances that cause heedlessness. This is going to waste away your ability to be productive in life and have that vigor and vitality to move your life forward. And if you've done that at any time in your life, you can see how that's actually been the case. Here, the Buddha is talking about haunting the streets at unfitting times. I know I used to do this quite a bit as a child. Never knew it was called haunting the streets at unfitting times, but I really like that phrase because it's exactly what I was essentially doing. So if you go out really late at night, the things that are going on at midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., they're not wholesome things that are going on around that time frame. So if you go out during that time frame, you're going to be interacting with individuals who are into unwholesome things. And then you get home 3, 4, 5 a.m., you go to sleep, maybe you wake up at 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m., and now you keep this cycle going on where you're not awake during the daylight hours where people are outside doing wholesome things. So this is going to waste away your ability to be productive in life and actually create forward progress because you're not awake and out interacting with people during the daylight hours when wholesome things are happening. Here where you see the Buddha talking about attending fairs, this is essentially what they did for entertainment during his lifetime. So we could actually think about this as, going to the movies or, messing around with social media extensively or YouTube videos or any kind of, indulgence in entertainment. Of course, you're going to have entertainment. Even when you're enlightened, you can still partake in entertainment. But it's when you do this excessively that's going to lead to a lack of your ability to move forward in life because the mind's really indulgent in entertainment and looking to do that continuously over and over and over again, trying to get pleasant feelings through that, rather than being out there and being productive in one's own life. Being addicted to gambling is going to waste away your vitality and your vigor, because you're going to waste away your resources that could otherwise be used to help you progress in life. You know, when you see casinos and you see these places being run, those casinos aren't built with the losses from the gambling public. They're actually built through the gains that the casino has actually won. So if you're addicted to gambling, or even gambling at all, this is coming from the mind's craving, desire, attachment. And now, as you're wasting away your money, you're wasting away your ability to move forward in life and be really productive. If you have unwholesome friends, that's what the Buddha's talking about here. Spending time around people who are doing unwise things and into unwholesome things, this is going to waste away your ability to go forward in life, because you would like to make relationships with people who are into wholesome things. Because while we shouldn't ever judge people and look down on people, that would be unwise. That would be the ego or conceit. We can make wise decisions through discernment of who we choose to associate with and who we choose not to associate with. And there's a cause and effect relationship there. So you need to be aware of the individuals that you're spending time with, and make sure you're selecting people that are into wholesome things. Now, the only people that are going to be doing things perfectly are going to be an enlightened being. So you're going to run across friends or family members who are into doing things that are maybe unwise and things that you wouldn't necessarily do. But you need to look at those things and see if they're affecting you in any way, right? If somebody's doing something that's unwise and it's not affecting you in your day-to-day life and the things that you're happening to do, it doesn't mean that you need to walk away from this relationship, but you just need to keep in mind and factor into any kind of decisions you're making about who to spend time with, about the decisions that they're making and whether they're affecting you or not. Now, when it comes to like your life partner or your children or people like this, you would like them to be into wholesome things and kind of support and encourage each other to do that. But if it's just kind of like an associate or a coworker or something like this, you're going to need to look at how significant it is of the unwholesome things they're doing and decide how much time and when you're going to spend time with them to ensure that those things aren't affecting you. Habitual idleness would be one like complacency or sluggishness or the lethargic condition. You understand that if you had that, that would make it difficult for you to progress. That would be a waste of your substance, your vitality, your vigor, where you could actually be moving your life forward. So the Buddha is helping you to understand these 6 things that would hinder you from being able to make real progress in your life. And then whether you choose to do these things or not, it's up to you. Remember, the Buddha is not teaching about rules or commandments. He's not trying to convince you to do anything at all. He's just showing you very clearly what is the natural law of Gotama. So you can see that cause and effect relationship and then make wise decisions for yourself of what you would choose to do or not to do. And that's what you're doing, is cultivating wisdom about this natural law so that then you can make wiser and wiser decisions to move your life forward and really create the ideal life for yourself. By the time you get to enlightenment, you will have selected where you're going to live, what type of job or occupation you're going to have, whether you're going to have a life partner or not, whether you're going to have children or not. You would have cultivated all this. You would have decided all these things. You would be living the ideal life. There isn't anything about your life that you would really change in terms of these major decisions about where you live, whether you have a life partner or not, whether you have children or not. These are all decisions you would have made on your way to enlightenment. So these types of things that the Buddha is explaining to you is that by eliminating this kind of habitual idleness and all these other things that he's talking about, it gives you time to be able to focus on developing this ideal life for yourself. Then he goes into what the individual was actually asking about, which is he was worshiping the 6 directions of the compass, and the Buddha turns this into the natural law of Gotama and helps them to be able to see how by you practicing and making decisions in a certain way, there's going to be a certain result for you. And it would be unwise to practice any of these things that the Buddha is describing in order to receive the results that he's talking about, but he's just helping you to understand what would be wise for you to practice. So the first part of what he's talking about here is what he suggests for you to practice. And then the next section of each portion of the compass is what you will end up experiencing because of the cause and effect relationship of the natural law of Gotama. And he goes through each one of these. Some of these things are based on things that were happening during the lifetime of the Buddha, like this one here, where he talks about, I will keep up with the family tradition. During the lifetime of the Buddha, if you were in a certain family, let's just say you were all blacksmiths and your uncles and your sisters and aunts and everybody was contributing to this business as a blacksmith. And now what you would do is you would basically continue to work in that tradition because the family has built up a certain amount of karma in the community, and an individual would essentially work in that same tradition. Where nowadays we do it differently, where we go out and we forge our own career, not necessarily doing what our family has done. So some of these things you need to look at and understand that the Buddha is teaching based on what was going on at that time, helping people see this cause and effect relationship. And then the same thing when he's teaching down here, he's teaching what one would be experiencing. So during the lifetime of the Buddha, parents were helping their children to be able to find a partner, whether it's a wife or a husband. They would help them to do that. Where nowadays we might think about it as, we come home with a partner and our parents might give us certain suggestions or advice, but you always need to take that with a grain of salt, because your goal in order to select a life partner isn't to please your parents. You need to make the decision that you think is wise. If I would have made the decision that my family was guiding me towards in terms of a life partner, I probably wouldn't have been with anybody, because no matter who I brought home, they didn't like them, right? So you're going to need to take this with a grain of salt, because your parents can be attached to you, and now nobody is a suitable wife or partner, right? So the Buddha is teaching you different things here that if you have questions on them, you can let me know. I'm not going to go through all of these because it's quite long and quite extensive. But if you've read this and you've gone through it, then you've seen the words of the Buddha. And then down here, I've actually shared with you my thoughts to be able to help you understand that. So you already have my thoughts here on all of these things. So let me know if you guys have any questions on this particular discourse. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. So we'll go to chapter 3. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, looks like Yi Hung. Go ahead, ma'am.
Repaying one's mother and father. Monks, there are two persons that cannot easily be repaid. What two? One's mother and father. Even if one should carry about one's mother on one shoulder and one's father on the other, and while doing so should have a lifespan of 100 years, live for 100 years, and if one should attend to them by anointing them with balms, by massaging, bathing, and rubbing their limbs, and they even void their urine and excrement there, one still would not have done enough for one's parents, nor would one have repaid them. Even if one were to establish one's parents as the superior rulers over this great earth, abounding in the 7 treasures, one still would not have done enough for one's parents, nor would one have repaid them. For what reason? Parents are of great help to their children. They bring them up, feed them, and show them the world. But monks, if when one's parents lack confidence, one encourages, settles, and establishes them in confidence. If when one's parents are unwholesome, one encourages, settles, and establishes them in virtuous behavior, moral conduct. If when one's parents are selfish, one encourages, settles, and establishes them in generosity. If when one's parents are unwise, one encourages, settles, and establishes them in wisdom. In such a way, one has done enough for one's parents, repaid them, and done more than enough for them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yi Hung. Some of you guys may remember that I teach this as part of the courses and programs that I teach, because this is an important discourse, because it helps you to understand about this relationship with our parents. That the way that the Buddha teaches is essentially we have like this debt of gratitude to our parents, because they are essentially our original teachers. If it wasn't for them or our caregivers, whoever took care of us as an infant and as we grew, they helped us to stand up on our own 2 feet. They bring us up, they feed us, and they show us the world. And without those individuals, we wouldn't be able to sustain our life today to the point where now we can work towards making the mind get to the point where it's actually training and getting to enlightenment. So the individuals who were taking care of us when we were younger, there's a certain debt of gratitude to those individuals. And the Buddha is explaining all these material things that you could potentially do for your parents and saying none of those are actually enough to be able to repay our family for the things that they did to be able to help bring us up and show us the world, particularly our mother and our father. But maybe you were raised by adoptive parents or grandparents or aunts or uncles. These are the same individuals. Essentially, the Buddha is talking about our original caregivers here. And the reason why there's this debt of gratitude is because they helped us get up on our own 2 feet. When we first came out as an infant, we couldn't take care of ourselves. We were completely dependent on the outside world. If it wasn't for other people in the world, we would have never been able to sustain our life. And I've never met anybody who's agreed with their parents 100% of the time because of the certain expectations that we have or that craving for permanence. And we might have a turbulent relationship with our family in the unenlightened state. But by the time you get to enlightenment, all of that has been sorted out, and you no longer have this anger and hostility and bitterness towards your family, that you've at least gotten to this point of appreciation and gratitude. Again, you might not agree with everything that your caregivers did as you were growing up, but at least you've gotten to this point of gratitude and appreciation where you don't have bitterness and hostility towards them. Understanding that you're going to disagree with the choices and decisions that they've made, that's just impermanence. They've grew up differently. They're going to make decisions differently than you. But if you crave for them to make decisions the same way as you might have a certain amount of bitterness or hostility in your own mind. So you're going to need to let that go and get to this place of appreciation and gratitude. And as you do so, as you're developing wisdom about this path, you might notice that your parents or your caregivers have a lack of wisdom about this path to enlightenment. There's the situation where children or people who have had caregivers in the past, that you've cultivated more wisdom about this path than the people who initially took care of you. That maybe they're struggling with certain aspects of life, and you see that to be the case. And the Buddha is saying the best way to repay them is to be able to help establish them in confidence, in the virtuous behavior or moral conduct, in generosity, and in wisdom. Because those things are what leads to enlightenment. All those material things that the Buddha was talking about, those are impermanent. They arise, change, and fade away. They're not going to lead to peacefulness and joy in one's own mind. But if you can establish them in confidence, meaning confidence in the Buddha and the teachings, or you can establish them in virtuous behavior like moral conduct or generosity or wisdom, this is going to really help propel them in life. But if you choose to do this, you need to do this very skillfully, very humbly. And first, you need to focus on your own wisdom, developing your own wisdom so that you know the path. If you go out there and try to help others on the path, then if you haven't cultivated the wisdom, you're not going to be of very much help to people. So it's important that you do this without craving, desire, attachment, and that you do it very humbly and make sure that you have cultivated the wisdom first. So you might try to help them maybe 2 or 3 times over the course of 6 months or a year. And ultimately, if they're just not interested, you're going to need to just step away and understand, like, okay, I've done enough for them. I've tried to help them in this case. This isn't this situation with, just anybody and everybody in the world. It's your parents that the Buddha is really talking about this with. He does talk in another discourse about people who would heed your advice that you're close with, like your family and relatives, that it would be wise to help establish them in the Four Noble Truths. But again, there's skillful ways to do this, because if you come at them with craving, anger, and ignorance, it's going to produce unwholesome results. So as best as possible, you would like to eliminate your craving for your family members to be practicing these teachings before you start, potentially introducing them to these particular teachings and the ability for them to learn and practice them. And again, you need to do that very humbly. If you guys would like examples of how to do that, I'm more than pleased to help you with that. I've done this with my mom, my grandmother, even my sister, my wife's mother, her father, stepfather, different people like this. Even my wife herself, I did these things with. at different times. So if you'd like advice on how to do this, you're more than welcome to do that. I think you are more than welcome to ask those questions. I think you guys understand what the confidence, the virtuous behavior, the generosity, and the wisdom is doing, is it's antidoting certain aspects of one's practice that is going to produce unwholesome results for them. But if you need help with that too, let me know and I can explain that aspect to you as well. So let me know what questions you guys have here. This is chapter 3 of volume 8. All right, I'm not seeing any questions, so we'll move on to chapter 4. Is there someone who would like to read this one? All right, Vibhav, go ahead, sir.
3 difficulties that separate mother and son. Monks, the uninstructed worldling speaks of these 3 difficulties that separate mother and son. What 3? There comes a time when a great wildfire arises. When the great wildfire has arisen, it burns the villages, towns, and cities. When villages, towns, and cities are burning up, the mother does not find her son, and the son does not find his mother. This is the first difficulty that separates mother and son, of which the uninstructed worldling speaks. Again, there comes a time when a great rain cloud arises. When the great rain cloud has arisen, a great landslide takes place. When the great landslide takes place, villages, towns, and cities are swept away. When villages, towns, and cities are being swept away, the mother does not find her son, and the son does not find his mother. This is the second difficulty that separates mother and son, of which the uninstructed worldling speaks. Again, there comes a time of a dangerous windstorm in the wilderness, when the people of the countryside, mounted on the vehicles, flee on all sides. When there is a dangerous windstorm in the wilderness, and the people of the countryside, mounted on their vehicles, are fleeing on all sides, the mother does not find her son, and the son does not find his mother. This is the third difficulty that separates mother and son, of which the uninstructed worldling speaks. These are the 3 difficulties that separate mother and son, of which the uninstructed worldling speaks. There are, monks, these 3 difficulties when mother and son reconnect, that the uninstructed worldling speaks of as difficulties that separate mother and son. What 3? There comes a time when the great wildfire arises, when a great rain cloud arises, and there comes a time of a dangerous windstorm in the wilderness. There is sometimes an occasion when the mother finds the son and the son finds the mother. These are the 3 difficulties when mother and son reconnect, and the uninstructed worldling speak of as difficulties that separate mother and son. There are, monks, these 3 difficulties that separate mother and son. What 3? The difficulty of old age, the difficulty of illness, and the difficulty of death. When the son is growing old, the mother cannot fulfill her wish. Let me grow old, but may my son not grow old. And when the mother is growing old, the son cannot fulfill his wish. Let me grow old, but may my mother not grow old. When the son has fallen ill, the mother cannot fulfill her wish. Let me fall ill, but my son not fall ill. And when the mother has fallen ill, the son cannot fulfill his wish. Let me fall ill, but may my mother not fall ill. When the son is dying, the mother cannot fulfill her wish. Let me die, but may my son not die. And when the mother is dying, the son cannot fulfill his wish. Let me die, but may my mother not die. These are the 3 difficulties that separate mother and son. There is a path, monks. There is a way that leads to abandoning and overcoming of these 3 difficulties when mother and son reconnect, and of these 3 difficulties that separate mother and son. And what is the path and way? It is just this noble eightfold path. That is right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. This is the path and way that leads to the abandoning and overcoming of these 3 difficulties when mother and son reconnect, and of these 3 difficulties that separate mother and son. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vibhav. So here, whenever you see the Buddha talking about the Eightfold Path, the Eightfold Path is there to extinguish craving, that longing, yearning. It's there to extinguish the anger and the ignorance, of course, but it's there to extinguish craving because it sets that up in the Four Noble Truths as part of right view. It's also helping you extinguish unwholesome Gama by producing only wholesome Gama. So what the Buddha is essentially talking about here with the mother and son is he's talking about attachment, how the mother and son are attached to each other, that they don't understand the universal truth of impermanence, of how they're going to get old, they're going to get ill, and they're going to die, and each other doesn't want the other person to be able to experience that. But because of the wisdom that the instructed noble disciple has, we already know that this is going to occur. But what the Buddha is talking about is the uninstructed worldling. This is a non-practitioner, that they don't understand the universal truth of impermanence, and they have this attachment between mother and son. But this can occur between mother and daughter. This can be father and son, father and daughter. This can be any number of relationships. If you've ever remember when you were a child, your parents looked a certain youthfulness, and then there probably was a point in time where you were maybe away from them for a period of time, and then you came back and you were like shocked by how much they aged in a very short period of time. This can be very shocking for a child to see their parent age, especially if you don't understand the universal truth of impermanence. So it's the Eightfold Path that's going to help you to eliminate all cravings, desires, attachments, including the ones to specific individuals like your mother or your children or people like this. There's other practices that you would like to employ that's going to help you to eliminate attachment to your parents and to your children. You can have a very loving and warm and enjoyable relationship with your relatives and the people around you when there isn't any attachment involved. When you have attachment, that's where you're going to be putting expectations on each other, controlling each other, and you're going to be angry and frustrated and irritated with each other. So when you get all that stuff out of the way, when you get rid of the expectations and the wants and the longing, the yearning, and the trying to control each other, you're going to have such a fulfilling and rewarding relationship. So you'd like to first start with the Eightfold Path, developing that and regularly practicing that. You should get to the point where you've memorized the Eightfold Path. If you guys haven't done that yet, then you need to work on that. Where if somebody said to you, hey, by the way, what is right intention? You'd be able to just boop, boop, boop. You'd say intention of renunciation, intention of non-ill will, and the intention of harmlessness. And you would know what those things are and how to actually practice them. You would like to know this for each individual factor of the Eightfold Path, because that's what's going to allow you to actually practice it. If you don't have it committed to your memory, you're not going to actually be able to practice it. So you like to get up and running with the Eightfold Path first, using the original words of the Buddha that you guys have access to. Then there's a class that I teach as part of the Harmony and Relationships course, where it's titled How to Eliminate Attachment to Those Who Are Closest to Us. So that particular class, I go through multiple things above and beyond the Eightfold Path that you can do in order to eliminate attachment to the people who are closest to you. So let me know what questions you guys have here. The Buddha is kind of alerting you to this difficulty, this struggle of being attached to people, and how that one can actually eliminate that through training of the mind. You can put your question into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So let's go to the next one. This is chapter 5. Would someone like to read this one? Okay, Yi Hang, go ahead, ma'am.
Four things wished for, desired, agreeable, and rarely gained in the world. Householder, there are these four things that are wished for, desired, agreeable, and rarely gained in the world. What for? One thinks, may wealth come to me righteously. This is the first thing in the world that is wished for, desired, agreeable, and rarely gained in the world. Having gained wealth righteously, one thinks, may fame come to me and to my relatives and preceptors. This is the second thing in the world that is wished for, desired, agreeable, rarely gained in the world. Having gained wealth righteously and having gained fame for oneself, and for one's relatives and preceptors, one thinks, may I live long and enjoy a long lifespan. This is the third thing in the world that is wished for, desired, agreeable, rarely gained in the world. Having gained wealth righteously, having gained fame for oneself and for one's relatives and preceptors, living long and enjoying a long lifespan, one thinks, with the breakup of the body after death, may I be reborn in a good destination, in a heavenly world. This is the fourth thing in the world that is wished for, desired, agreeable, rarely gained in the world. These are the four things that are wished for, desired, agreeable, and rarely gained in the world. These are, householder, four other things that lead to obtaining those four things. What for? Accomplishment in confidence, accomplishment in virtuous behavior, accomplishment in generosity, and accomplishment in wisdom, and what, householder, is accomplishment in confidence. Here, a noble disciple is endowed with confidence. He places confidence in the enlightenment of the Tathagata. Thus, the perfectly enlightened one is an arahant, perfectly enlightened, accomplished in true wisdom and conduct, fortunate knower of the world, unsurpassed trainer of persons to be tamed, teacher of heavenly beings and humans, the enlightened one, the perfectly enlightened one. This is called accomplishment in confidence. And what is accomplishment in virtuous behavior? Here, a noble disciple abstains from the destruction of life, abstains from taking what is not given, abstains from sexual misconduct, abstains from false speech, abstains from liquor, wine, and intoxicants, substances that causes heedlessness, the basis for heedlessness. This is called accomplishment in virtuous behavior. And what is accomplishment in generosity? Here, a noble disciple resides at home with a mind free from the stain of selfishness, freely generous, open-handed, joyful in relinquishment, devoted to charity, joyful in giving and sharing. This is called accomplishment in generosity. And what is accomplishment in wisdom? If one dwells with a mind overcome by longing and unrighteous sensual desires, one does what should be avoided and neglects one's duty, so that one's fame and peacefulness are spoiled. If one dwells with a mind overcome by ill will, one does what should be avoided and neglects one's duty, so that one's fame and peacefulness are spoiled. If one dwells with a mind overcome by complacency, one does what should be avoided and neglects one's duty, so that one's fame and peacefulness are spoiled. If one dwells with a mind overcome by restlessness and worry, one does what should be avoided and neglects one's duty, so that one's fame and peacefulness are spoiled. If one dwells with a mind overcome by doubt, one does what should be avoided and neglects one's duty, so that one's fame and peacefulness are spoiled. When, householder, a noble disciple has understood thus, longing and unrighteous sensual desires are a defilement of the mind. He abandons them. When he has understood thus, ill will is a defilement of the mind. He abandons it. When he has understood thus, complacency is a defilement of the mind. He abandons it. When he has understood thus, restlessness and worry are a defilement of the mind. He abandons them. When he has understood thus, doubt is a defilement of the mind. He abandons it. When, householder, a noble disciple has understood thus, longing and unrighteous sensual desires are a defilement of the mind and has abandoned them. When he has understood thus, ill will is a defilement of the mind and has abandoned it. When he has understood thus, complacency is a defilement of the mind and has abandoned it. When he has understood thus, restlessness and worry are a defilement of the mind and has abandoned them. When he has understood thus, doubt is a defilement of the mind and has abandoned it. He is then called a noble disciple of great wisdom, of wide wisdom, one who sees the range, one accomplished in wisdom. This is called accomplishment in wisdom. These are the four things that lead to obtaining the four things that are wished for, desired, agreeable, and rarely gained in the world. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So the Buddha here is describing at first the things that people really wish for and they consider to be agreeable. And they could say that people are longing, yearning, and craving these things. Well, you need to eliminate the craving for these things of wealth and fame and living a long life and being reborn in a good destination. Instead, you can understand what leads to these kinds of things. Not that you need to long and yearn and do what the Buddha is teaching because you want these or you're longing and yearning for them, but just because you're working towards an improved life, you would like to cultivate these things that the Buddha is describing here, which are the 4 things that are leading to those things. But instead, these 4 things are also leading to enlightenment. These are the 4 things that he mentioned that it would be wise to establish our parents in if we would like to repay them for this debt of gratitude. But you need to first establish that for yourself before you can establish other people in these particular things. Confidence in the Buddha, virtuous behavior, which is improved moral conduct, generosity, which is being willing to give and share, living open-handedly, and then wisdom. And the wisdom comes from the learning, reflecting to independently verify, and then the practice to be able to practice the teachings. Here, the Buddha is referring to the 5 hindrances when he's talking about the longing and unrighteous sensual desire. That's the first hindrance to your enlightenment, the ill will, complacency, restlessness, and worry and doubt. Those are the 5 hindrances. And he says, okay, when you've cultivated wisdom of these and you've abandoned them from the mind, then you've accomplished wisdom, because you would have needed to understand what each one of these things are and the methods and the techniques of how to actually eliminate them. And that's going to help you to be able to cultivate your wisdom to then be able to practice and make your way to enlightenment. And that's ultimately going to help an individual to get to those 4 things that they're wishing for. But in reality, it's also helping you get to enlightenment as well. So the Buddha oftentimes during his lifetime was guiding household practitioners to this improved life. A household practitioner could get to enlightenment, but since it was more rare than what he could do with with ordained practitioners, oftentimes what you're going to see, he's guiding household practitioners just to kind of practice some moral conduct, some generosity, cultivate some wisdom, but he's not really going like super in depth with household practitioners. He's doing that with ordained practitioners, and then knowing that, yes, as household practitioners have the time and they're able to learn right alongside the ordained practitioners, they would be able to learn the same things that it takes you to get to enlightenment. But since it was more rare, he's tending to talk to the household practitioners about things like this, of how to get to this improved life, either in this life or some future life. But remember, household practitioners can assuredly get to enlightenment in this life, if that's what it is that you're choosing to do. So let me know what questions you guys have here. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or raise your hand in Zoom if you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, so we'll move on to the next chapter. These are all pretty self-explanatory for today. I think you guys are understanding them because you've been studying for a while now. Looks like Pat's volunteering to read, or maybe he has a question. Which one is it, Pat?
Reading, please.
Okay, sure. This is chapter 6.
9 things rooted in craving. I will teach you, monks, 9 things rooted in craving. What are the 9 things rooted in craving? Independence on craving, there is seeking. Independence on seeking, there is gain. Independence on gain, there is judgment. Independence on judgment, there is desire and lust. Independence on desire and lust, there is attachment. Independence on attachment, there is possessiveness. Independence on possessiveness, there is selfishness. Independence on selfishness, there is safeguarding. With safeguarding as the foundation, originate the taking up of rods and weapons, fights, contentions, and disputes, accusations, argumentative speech, and false speech, and many other evil, unwholesome things. These are the 9 things rooted in craving. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pat. So as you guys know, a major part of the path to enlightenment is to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning, chasing after the objects of your affection and forming your feelings on that. And you also probably know that the Buddha is a real expert in showing this cause and effect relationship of how one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. It's almost like dominoes falling. And you've studied about craving and you understand how it leads to discontentedness, but it also leads to fights and the things that he's talking about here, and arguments and accusations and things like that. So he's showing you that cause and effect. So the craving is the longing, yearning, seeking outside yourself for something external to be satisfying and pleasing. This leads to seeking. That's the seeking. That's the longing, yearning. And now as you're seeking, then there's going to be a certain amount of gain where you're gaining certain material possessions. Then once you gain those material possessions, you're going to be judging yourself and others. Like, my car's not as nice as that person's car. Maybe I need to get another car, right? Because that judgment leads to a further desire, further craving and longing, yearning, because you're looking at your house versus other people's house. You're looking at your clothes and jewelry versus other people's. And now when you're judging, it leads to more craving and more lust. And then that leads to attachment. In the earlier classes, I teach craving, desire, attachment all as one thing. But here you're starting to learn that craving, desire, that's that longing, yearning, looking external. But the clinging and the attachment is the holding on. So once there's the longing, the yearning, and you've acquired a certain amount of material objects, then there's the attachment where the mind's clinging and holding on to things. And then that's where, with the attachment, the mind becomes possessive. That it's like, these are my things, right? I don't want anybody touching my things. And that's where the selfishness comes in with the possession. And now when there's that selfishness, there's the safeguarding and not wanting anybody to touch your things. And now maybe you're locking things up constantly. You're not trusting people to come in contact with your things. And now that creates the taking up of weapons in order to be able to safeguard those things. Then there's fight, contentions, disputes, accusations, argumentative speech, false speech, and other evil, unwholesome things. All of this coming back to craving. So you can see that craving, desire, this longing, this yearning, is just such an evil thing in the mind that it leads to so many unwholesome results, not just discontentedness in the mind, but all these other things as well. And that's one of the reasons why the Buddha is focusing you on how to eliminate that and giving you the tools like breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and generosity, and the whole entire Eightfold Path to teach you how to eliminate these cravings, desires, attachments from the mind. So let me know what questions you guys have here on chapter 6, 9 things rooted in craving. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. So now we go to chapter 7. Someone like to read this? Okay, it looks like Samantha. Then we've got some more after that. So if you guys leave your hands up, I'll be able to call on you, or you can just re-raise your hand after Samantha reads.
Indebtedness is discontentedness in the world. Monks, isn't poverty discontentedness in the world for one who enjoys sensual pleasures? If a poor, impoverished, needy person gets into debt, isn't his indebtedness too discontentedness in the world for one who enjoys sensual pleasures? If a poor, impoverished, needy person who has gotten into debt promises to pay interest, isn't the interest too discontentedness in the world for one who enjoys sensual pleasures? If a poor, impoverished, needy person who has promised to pay interest cannot pay it when it falls due, they admonish him. Isn't being admonished too discontentedness in the world for one who enjoys sensual pleasures? If a poor, impoverished, needy person who is admonished does not pay, they prosecute him. Isn't prosecution too discontentedness in the world for one who enjoys sensual pleasures? If a poor, impoverished, needy person who is prosecuted does not pay, they imprison him. Isn't imprisonment too discontentedness in the world for one who enjoys sensual pleasures? So, monks, for one who enjoys sensual pleasures, poverty is discontentedness in the world. Getting into debt is discontentedness in the world. Having to pay interest is discontentedness in the world. Being admonished is discontentedness in the world. Prosecution is discontentedness in the world. And imprisonment is discontentedness in the world. So too, monks, when one does not have confidence in wholesome qualities, when one does not have a sense of moral wrongdoing and wholesome qualities, when one does not have moral concern and wholesome qualities, when one does not have energy and wholesome qualities, when one does not have wisdom and wholesome qualities, in the noble one's discipline, one is called a poor, impoverished, needy person. Having no confidence, no sense of moral wrongdoing,
no moral concern, no energy, no wisdom and wholesome qualities, that poor, impoverished, needy person engages in misconduct by body, speech, and mind. This, I say, is his getting into debt. To conceal his bodily, verbal, and mental misconduct, he nurtures an evil desire. He wishes, let no one know me. He intends, let no one know me. He speaks statements, let no one know me. He makes bodily actions, let no one know me. This, I say, is the interest he must pay. Well-behaved fellow monks speak thus about him. This venerable one acts in such a way, behaves in such a way. This, I say, is his being admonished. When he has gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree, to an empty dwelling, evil, unwholesome thoughts accompanied by remorse attack him. This, I say, is his prosecution. Then, with the breakup of the body after death, that poor, impoverished, needy person who engaged in misconduct by body, speech, and mind is bound in the prison of hell or the prison of the animal realm. I do not see, monks, any other prison that is as terrible and harsh, such an obstacle to attaining the unsurpassed security from bondage as the prison of hell or the prison of the animal realm. Poverty is called discontentedness in the world. So too is getting into debt. A poor person who becomes indebted is troubled while enjoying himself. Then they prosecute him, and he also incurs imprisonment. This imprisonment is indeed discontentedness, for one yearning for gain and sensual pleasures. Just so, in the noble one's discipline, one in whom confidence is lacking, who does not see danger and wrongdoing and rude, heaps up a mass of evil, unwholesome gama. Having engaged in misconduct by body, speech, and mind, he forms the wish, may no one find out about me. He twists around with his body, by speech or mind, he piles up his evil deeds in one way or another, repeatedly. This unwise evildoer, knowing his own misdeeds, is a poor person who falls into debt, troubled while enjoying himself. His thoughts then prosecute him, painful mental states born of remorse, whether in the village or the forest. This unwise evildoer, knowing his own misdeeds, goes to a certain animal realm, or is even bound in hell. This indeed is the discontentedness of bondage, from which the wise person is freed, giving with wealth righteously gained, settling his mind and confidence.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. So there's two aspects of this discourse that you can look at to help you understand. I'll first talk about one aspect of it that you can read through and kind of think of it in this way. And then there's another way to read through this and kind of think of it in that way. And both of these are going to help you in your practice. So where he says, monks, isn't poverty discontentedness in the world for one who enjoys sensual pleasures? So here, if you're enjoying sensual pleasures, meaning that you're forming your inner feelings based on this thing. Because remember, an enlightened being enjoys life. They enjoy it way more than an unenlightened being. And they're enjoying the things that they're doing. They're enjoying everything that they're doing. But if you're basing your inner feelings on it, that's where the mind has conditioned pleasant feelings. So the mind needs to learn how to enjoy something without conditioned pleasant feelings. But if you allow the mind to get those conditioned pleasant feelings, as you guys have heard me say many times, it's only a matter of time before the painful ones come in. So if you allow the mind to have those conditioned pleasant feelings based on sensual pleasures, you're now in debt because you've got to pay this debt back with the painful feelings. It's only a matter of time before those painful feelings come, because if you get happy because of your bank account being up here, well, when it goes down here, you'll be frustrated or agitated or annoyed or any other thing that your mind is basing its inner feelings on. When you get those conditioned pleasant feelings, that object is going to change due to impermanence, and now you've got to pay that debt back. So that's one way that you can read through this and understand what the Buddha is teaching you. But then you can also read through it in terms of thinking about actual debt, real debt, where you're actually taking on debt, where you owe people money. Now you've got this burden of carrying around having to owe people money and pay people money back, where you would like to get free of that, because having debt on your shoulders is a real burden to bear. You would like to get free of all of this. And that's another way that you can read through this entire discourse. And rather than walk you through the entire thing, Samantha did a wonderful job reading it very clearly. You can read through it in those two different ways, and you can see what the Buddha is talking about here. as you walk your way through it. It's very clear with the Buddha showing this cause and effect. One way of going into debt in terms of forming conditioned feelings, because the painful ones are coming right behind that. And the other one is getting into actual debt where you owe people some kind of material possession, and now you're carrying around this burden to have to pay that back. And that's going to create stress and pressure in your mind because you have this craving, this desire, this attachment in the mind. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. This is chapter 7 of volume 8. All right, we don't have any questions here. So there was a bunch of people who raised their hand. If you guys would like to raise your hand again. Oh, Viphav, you have a question? Let me go to Viphav. Go ahead, sir.
David, I just wanted to understand or clarify that this Buddha is saying that the being born poor and having and being in poverty and indebtedness is because of your unwholesome karma, and that is discontentedness. That's what he's, or is just saying that because you're basically living life as a householder in poverty, that is discontentedness, or is it both?
He does teach what you just described, but he's not teaching it here. He does teach that being reborn into a life of poverty, this is the unwholesome karma from our decisions that we've made in previous lives. But here, this is more about decisions you're making in the current life to either indulge in sensual pleasures, and now you're in this debt because you're going to need to experience these painful feelings as a result. And then he also talks about actual physical debt of being in debt. And now this is going to produce more and more discontentedness in the mind because of the craving. He's using the analogy of an impoverished person to help you understand what it's like to go into debt with these sensual pleasures and with actual physical debt.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I saw Keely, Marcy, Yihang. Are you guys interested in reading this next chapter? Any of you guys? Okay, looks like there we go, Keely, and then we'll have Yihang after that.
Thank you. Welfare and peacefulness in this present life. Honorable Sir, we are householders enjoying sensual pleasures, living at home in a house full of children. We use sandalwood from Kasi. We wear garlands, scents, and ornaments. We receive gold and silver. Let the perfectly enlightened one teach us the teachings in a way that will lead to our welfare and peacefulness in this present life and in future lives. There are Vayarapaja, these 4 things that lead to the welfare and peacefulness of a householder in this present life. What for? 1. Accomplishment in initiative. 2. Accomplishment in protection. 3. Wholesome friendship. 4. And balanced living. Accomplishment in initiative. And what is the accomplishment in initiative? Here, whatever may be the means by which a householder earns his living, whether by farming, trade, raising cattle, archery, government service, or some other craft. He is skillful and diligent. He possesses sound and wise decision-making about it in order to carry out and arrange it properly. This is called accomplishment in initiative. Accomplishment in protection. And what is accomplishment in protection? Here, a householder sets up protection and guard over the wealth he has acquired by initiative and energy, amassed by the strength of his arms, earned by the sweat of his brow, righteous wealth righteously gained, thinking, how can I prevent kings and thieves from taking it, fire from burning it, floods from sweeping it off, and displeasing payers from taking it? This is called accomplishment in protection. Wholesome friendship. And what is wholesome friendship? Here, in whatever village or town a householder lives, He associates with householders or their sons, whether young but of mature virtue, or old or mature virtue, who are accomplished in confidence, virtuous behavior, moral conduct, generosity, and wisdom. He converses with them and engages in discussion with them. To the extent that they are accomplished in confidence, he emulates them with respect to their accomplishment in confidence. To the extent that they are accomplishment in virtuous behavior, moral conduct, he emulates them with respect to their accomplishment in virtuous behavior. To the extent that they are accomplished in generosity, he emulates them with their accomplishment in generosity. To the extent that they are accomplished in wisdom, he emulates them with respect to their accomplishment in wisdom. This is called wholesome friendship, balanced living. And what is balanced living? Here, a householder knows his income and expenditures and lives a balanced life, neither too extravagant nor too frugal. Aware, in this way, my income will exceed my expenditures rather than the reserves. Just as an appraiser or his apprentice holding up a scale knows, by so much it has done, by so much it has gone up, so a householder knows his income and expenditures and leads a balanced life, neither too extravagant nor too frugal. Aware, in this way, my income will exceed my expenditures rather than the reverse. If this householder has a small income but lives lusciously, others would say of him, this householder eats his wealth just like an eater of figs. But if he has a large income but lives sparingly, others would say of him, this householder may even starve himself. But it is called balanced living when a householder knows his income and expenditures and leads a balanced life, neither too extravagant nor too frugal. Aware, in this way, my income will exceed my expenditures rather than the reserves. This is called balanced living. These are the four things that lead to the welfare and peacefulness of a householder in this very life. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Keely. So here a household practitioner is asking the Buddha how to get to this peacefulness in this particular life and have a good welfare. And the Buddha is explaining these four things that an individual could practice: this accomplishment and initiative, protection, having wholesome friendships, and balanced living. The accomplishment and initiative is to have a certain livelihood that you know well, and you've diligently and skillfully apply your wisdom to be able to carry it out and actually be able to fulfill the duties and responsibilities that you have in a particular livelihood. That's going to help you to sustain your income and make sure that you have a certain amount of income and you can build wholesome karma in your particular profession. And that's why you would like to look to the Eightfold Path of right livelihood to ensure that you're developing a right livelihood. But having a livelihood that you have initiative in and you're earning that living fairly and without causing harm to others, this is going to lead to your peacefulness and welfare in this life. And then as you're cultivating wealth, you would like to protect that wealth and making sure that you're doing things to protect it. For example, I dropped off my car that you guys purchased me just recently at a car wash, and they sent me a message and saying that they had scratched the car, or they said that the car had been scratched before that I actually dropped it off. And I knew that this wasn't the case. And there was pictures of the car that they were able to easily see that the car wasn't scratched. And they were able to do what they needed to do in order to wash the car. And they got rid of all of that stuff. And there weren't any scratches on the car. But nonetheless, these are the kinds of things you would like to do, is maybe videotape your car before you drop it off somewhere. And this will kind of protect it so that if there's ever a discrepancy as you walk away from the car wash and they're taking care of your car, that you have a video to turn back to and show that, hey, this is the condition of the car. This could be considered protection of your wealth and your property. Or you might think about it as like getting insurance or things like this. Or maybe if you're going away, maybe you need to do certain things to your property, like turning off the water or turning off the gas or things of this nature, in order to make sure that your property is well protected before you leave for a particular period of time. Here, the Buddha is talking about preventing kings and thieves from this property. You might think about the government as kings. During the lifetime of the Buddha, kings must have stole people's property and things like that, depending on their moral conduct. And of course, there's thieves, and then there's fire, there's floods, things like this. So you would like to be able to protect against that with things like insurance or putting your material property in a place where it won't get affected by things like burning or floods. And then displeasing heirs, the way you protect against that is make sure you have a very clear document upon death that there's a will in place, and that you even communicated that long before your death. So people know before you even die what is actually in the will. That way, when you die, it's not a big mystery. If anybody's confused about the will, you're alive and you're able to address it before you actually pass away. So this would be a way to actually protect your property against displeasing heirs, because people can fight over that stuff and they spend more money trying to fight over your property, and they exhaust their income and exhaust their wealth just fighting over something that's there. So these are the ways that you could protect any kind of wealth that you've gained. Then having wholesome friends, this is going to also lead to your peacefulness and welfare in this very life. And we've talked about that at different times, because having wholesome friends, your mind's going to be influenced by that. And the Buddha talks about that here. I know that many of you guys are making friendships among the community. You guys don't, of course, hang out every day, because that would be attachment if you did. But nonetheless, you guys are having friendships and you're helping each other, not only in classes, but outside of classes and things like this. I see many people in our community making more and more relationships and learning how to do that without attachment. So having wholesome friends will lead to your peacefulness and welfare, because when you need help with a particular thing, there'll be somebody that's there to help you because you've cultivated this wholesome karma in all your relationships. And then balanced living is kind of related to what we were talking about previously with your income and expenditures. That if your income is higher than your expenditures, you've got a gap there, you've got some savings that you can regularly build up. This is going to lead to your peacefulness and welfare. Then if that's reversed, where your expenses are higher than your income, that's going to not lead to your welfare and peacefulness. So the Buddha talked about this balanced living and making sure that your income and expenses are balanced, and there's even a gap for you to be able to do some savings and things like that. So let me know what questions you guys have here. This is a great teaching for household practitioners to be able to practice. All right, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So now we'll go down to this next one. This is chapter 9. And I think it was Yihang would like to read this one. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. For the sources of depletion and accumulation of the wealth. The four sources of depletion of the wealth. Vyagapasha, the wealth thus amassed has four sources of depletion. 1. Womanizing. 2. Drunkenness, heedlessness. 3. Gambling. 4. Unwholesome friendship, unwholesome companionship, unwholesome comradeship. Vyagapasha, just as if there were a large reservoir with 4 inlets and 4 outlets, and a man would close the inlets and open the outlets, and sufficient rain does not fall. One could predict the water in the reservoir to decrease rather than increase. Vyagapasha, so the wealth thus amassed has 4 sources of depletion. 1. Womanizing. 2. Drunkenness, heedlessness. 3. Gambling. 4. Unwholesome friendship, unwholesome companionship, unwholesome comradeship. The 4 sources of accumulation of the wealth. Vyagapasha, the wealth Wealth thus amassed has four sources of accumulation. 1. One avoids womanizing. 2. One avoids drunkenness, heedlessness. 3. One avoids gambling. 4. One cultivates wholesome friendship, wholesome companionship, wholesome comradeship. Vyagapacha, just as if there were a large reservoir with 4 inlets and 4 outlets, and a man would open the inlets and close the outlets, and sufficient rain falls. One could predict the water in the reservoir to increase rather than decrease. Vyagapacha, so the wealth thus amassed has 4 sources of accumulation. 1. One avoids womanizing. 2. One avoids drunkenness, heedlessness. 3. One avoids gambling. 4. One cultivates wholesome friendship, wholesome companionship, wholesome comradeship. These are the 4 things that lead to the welfare and peacefulness of a householder in this very life. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yihang. So here, the Buddha is guiding you to this peaceful and joyful mental state, but also creating a peaceful and joyful life for yourself. And if you don't understand how to do that, then you're not going to be able to do it. So he's helping you with the Eightfold Path and training the mind and using things like meditation and all these other things. But also, as you guys know, he's helping you to see this cause and effect relationship with the natural law of karma. And here he's talking about developing your wealth and depleting your wealth, because not that the goal should be to be rich and wealthy, although you can be enlightened and be rich and wealthy, but you're going to need a certain amount of income and a certain amount of wealth in order to live a comfortable lifestyle with that certain amount of income and ultimately a certain amount of wealth. So you're going to need to know how to ensure that you're not depleting your wealth and that you're able to accumulate wealth in your day-to-day life. And if you've done any of these things that he's talking about, you'll know that it either depletes wealth, or if you avoid these things, you'll see that it helps you accumulate wealth. Here he's talking to a male, so he's talking about womanizing, but we can relate this to other genders as well, and other people who prefer other genders for sex, essentially, is what he's talking about here, is chasing after a member of a person that you find to be attractive, or multiple people is what womanizing is that you're just chasing and chasing and chasing and longing, yearning, and you're having relationships with lots of different people in terms of sexual relationships and partying and drinking it up and all these kinds of things. He's talking about that here, right? Starting off with womanizing and then talking about heedlessness, talking about gambling, and then talking about unwholesome friendships. If you're doing any of these things, it's going to lead to the depletion of wealth. And if you've done any of these things, you can see how that's the case. Because having lots of different sexual partners, you're going to have to spend a certain amount of money to do that. To take substances that cause heedlessness, this is just a waste. It's putting poison into the body, and you're just, basically experiencing that, and then it's gone. Gambling, that's going to lead to a depletion of wealth. And having unwholesome friends, you're going to find yourself in all kinds of trouble, where you might have to bail yourself out of jail. You might have to hire lawyers. You might find that you guys are breaking or destroying things, and you have to repair that in order to make amends with a certain business owner or a certain resident of a home or something like that. So by avoiding these things, like the Buddha is talking about down here, this is what's going to help you to make sure you can accumulate wealth, in addition to other things that he teaches as well. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. So now let's go to chapter 10. Is there someone who would like to finish us off for today? Chapter 10. And actually, since no one's risen their hand yet, this is actually the same thing that we just read earlier. I see, Samantha, you've raised your hand. This is the Buddha talking about welfare and peacefulness in a future life. And these are all the same 4 things that he was talking about previously. We've actually already read this. So let me just see if there's anything different. He shortened up the accomplishment in wisdom here compared to our previous discourse. And essentially what he's talking about here is cultivating the wisdom of the universal truth of impermanence, where he says he possesses the wisdom that discerns arising and passing away. That's understanding the universal truth of impermanence. And that's the very first teaching that you would really need to know in order to get on the path to enlightenment, because that's what's going to help you to understand the Four Noble Truths. So here he's talking about that instead of that longer version of accomplishment in wisdom where he was talking about the 5 hindrances. So this is exactly the same. So Samantha, thank you for volunteering, but I don't think we need to read this one because this is the only section that's actually different. Okay. Let me know if you guys have any questions on any of these things, or since we have a little bit of time here, if you guys have any questions about any aspect of your practice, you're more than welcome to ask those. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do then is just end by thanking all of you guys. Thank you for reading. Thank you for your interest to learn and grow on the path to enlightenment. Thank you for any questions or anything that you do in order to support the teachings continuing to be shared in the world. Thank you so much for your support. Tomorrow in our group learning program, I'm going to be in Volume 1, Chapter 16, which is titled Dissolving the Ego, Ego Serves No Purpose. This is where I'm going to teach you what the ego is and how to actually eliminate it. This is something that many people need work on, and it takes many years to work on eliminating this. So if you would like to join that class in order to refresh your memory about this, or to be able to build up your wisdom about how to actually approach this, because you're oftentimes working on this for multiple years before it actually is eliminated from the mind, you're more than welcome to join either 9 a.m. in the morning or 9 p.m. in the evening. Tomorrow, the certain parts of the world is going to be changing their time. So keep that in mind as you guys are attending classes starting tomorrow at 9 p.m. Thai time. By that time, a lot of the world will have changed their clocks. So Thailand doesn't change their clocks. So if you're in one of the places where your clocks get changed, then it's going to bump up an hour of when the classes take place. So if you normally join at, say, 7 a.m., then it's going to be 8 a.m. to join for classes. Or if you normally join at 6 a.m., it's going to be 7 a.m. for classes starting tomorrow at the 9 p.m. class for me. So again, thank you all for joining, and perhaps we'll see you guys in one of these future classes. And take care and have a lovely and wonderful rest of your day. See you next time. Sawadee ka. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.